Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cloud Show. Today, I'm going to talk to a good friend of mine. His name is Joe, and we are going to talk about a very important topic because everybody asks about how to cut costs in the cloud. How do you spend only? The cloud has this promise: you only pay for what you use. So how do you achieve that? How do you only pay for what you use and not over provision or overpay for more than what you actually are going to be actually using and your users need? That is a great topic for today's episode of The Cloud Show. Hello, my friend. How are you, Joe?
Good. How you doing, Magnus?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for asking. So you're over there at home now. You were in Mauritius just recently?
Yeah, I was in Mauritius for about 2 weeks. Gorgeous,
Yeah?
Gorgeous place. Wife didn't want to leave. Our host kept talking to us. Oh, you can move down here now. We can help you find a place in there.
Wow. That's dangerous. You'd have to hold your wife's ears. It's like, no, we're not. So where is home otherwise?
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, in the western part of the United States.
Yep. West, southwest, sort of.
Yep, in the southwest part.
Yep,
where it's
perfect.
Nice and warm. We've been averaging around 115 degrees Fahrenheit or 47-ish, 48 Celsius.
I was just going to say, what's that in normal degrees?
Yeah, It sounds a lot hotter when you do it in the hundreds.
Yeah, right. And professionally, you are a team leader for various technical teams and cloud stuff teams. You have been working for many years with that.
Sort of, yes.
Okay, tell us.
As of Friday, I'll be unemployed. So,
but open for new opportunities, folks.
Yes. For the last 10 years, basically, I've been leading teams in our migration for kind of moving stuff on-prem into the cloud where it seemed fit. Part of that migration has been modernization of the apps, taking older .NET apps or .NET Framework apps, moving them on to .NET Core, and then seeing if it makes sense for them to be in the cloud or stay on-prem. Some of our high availability or high risk apps, meaning like if they're down, the business is down, a lot of those we moved into the cloud just for safety, scalability, reliability, etc.
Yeah, all right. That's all really cool work because I would know. I do much of the same, and I love doing that. And again, to go into the topic of this conversation today, we were talking about what should we talk about? What does cloud leaders need to know about? And I think they need to know, here, pick your brain about how to use, how to pay only for what you use. That is one of the promises of the cloud, right? You only pay per use. But how do you achieve that? How do you get to a point where you are spending exactly the amount that you need for your application to run and your users to be happy, and you're only paying for that much? How do you do it?
It's a bit challenging, obviously. You have to know what you're using, and that's that's one of the keys, figuring out what you do. When you're a software engineer, it's very easy to pick the largest instance of the largest storage space of the largest thing because you're not paying for it, in theory, right? So what a lot of us do is just pick the highest of everything, and then when we get that magical bill at the end for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, everyone goes around and says, "Oh no, what do I do?" So there are a couple of different tricks that we tend to do. One is we start off small and then add as needed, but it's the as needed part that's always hard. Like, how do you know when you need to add something or not? And that's where kind of the open telemetry comes in. if you're on Azure, it's App Insights. If you're on AWS, it's X-Ray. And these provide tools to kind of look into your application and see what you're using.
Yeah.
Because it's important to know if you have a server, let's say I have a big honking beast that, has 32 processors and, 128 gig of memory. Using OpenTelemetry, you can look at it and see, well, that machine is using 2% CPU the entire time. Maybe I don't need that big of a machine. I can start scaling it back. So that's where telemetry really comes in and lets you see into your app how it's being used, who's using it, where it's being used from. You can also save cost. Let's say you have a CDN and you're set, across, 6 different continents. What if you only have users in 2 of those continents? Why bother with those other, extra CDN resources?
So CDN is a content delivery network where you put your files closer to the user. So when they download a file, it's instant. Like, for example, if I share my favorite cat video on Facebook, all my friends around the world, you can watch it in Arizona and people can watch it everywhere. And for everyone, it appears to be close to them. It appears to start straight away. But if everyone were downloading it from like here in Malmo, Sweden, wherever I posted it from, it would take forever or it would be lag, right?
Yep.
So with a CDN, you just put everything everywhere for everyone to be close to the data, which means you have to duplicate the data everywhere. And that adds cost. Good point.
That adds cost as well as, how resilient or how quick you want it.
Yeah, definitely. That's always a good trade-off there. But coming back to that point you were saying about how the 2% CPU thing, that was always the case, right? Before the cloud, that you had to calculate like a worst case scenario. How much would you need in capacity at the very worst case? And then you kind of had to buy and provision hardware for the worst case, because otherwise you would never be able to accommodate it, which means that across the world, all of servers are like running at like 10% or less, or, that's, 10% is probably a good number, right?
Yeah, and that's where a lot of, virtualization techniques came in place, things like VMware and stuff that help you maximize that so they handle the load balancing. But, in the cloud world, we have a lot of that. A lot of people want to control their servers by adding their own VMs or scaling up their own version of SQL Server or their own version of, Oracle or what have you, even web servers. But, Microsoft and the other cloud providers have realized that it's not necessary. There's lots of waste when you scale that up. So they created, different services like App Service that lets you share the resources and you can get a much, more scalable one. But for basic sites, they have smaller instances, and by using those, you're saving on a lot of the cost of getting your own custom VM.
Yeah, it really does, and that's about I suppose the term of right sizing, right?
Yep.
You have to know which size is right, because there are many sizes of things. You can pay for a large size, but if you're not using it, you're spending money. And the stockholders at Microsoft or AWS, right? They salute you, but it's not good for you. It's not good for your business. You're spending the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's like buying a bus at home when you only have 2 people in your house. You can get away with a small car.
That's right. That's a very good example of a similar situation. So right sizing is important, but also the fact that no application, no matter which, is always used at the same requirement, at the same capacity, around the clock, around the week, around the weekend, or whatever, right? Every application is always has always highs and lows, right, in terms of usage. Yep. So what do you do for managing that? I know you can scale to meet the load requirements. What's that about?
So the easiest thing to do is there are in Application Insights or Azure Monitor, depending on what what version of documentation you're looking at. They have lots of tools with alerting as well as custom reports that you can do, so you can kind of watch the trends and see. There's They even have trend reports saying Fridays at 5 p.m. or 1700, you'll see that, you know, your app spikes, but outside of that, it doesn't. So you can run that custom telemetry to kind of watch for the trends. Also looking at the storage, because, you know, sometimes that's overutilized too, or sometimes you turn on things and you don't forget, or you forget about them. I have a not so funny story. At one point, I was building a side app for one of my open source projects, and I deployed it, and I didn't forget about it, but, you know, work came up and I stopped working on it. And about a month later, I get a notification from Azure that my account has been turned off because I hit my spend limit. And I'm like, how did I hit my spend limit? I've been using this forever. Turned out I made a change to the app, and when I deployed it to prod, I didn't turn off one of the telemetry settings. So I was logging everything to it. So I ended up sending 1 too many logs, and then 2, I filled up my my storage space that I was using. I was averaging, like, I don't know, a meg or 2 a month, and I turned it out to be like 30 gig.
Okay, that's nuts. And then things happen, right? So you need to, in order to break this down, you need to know what you need to measure. You need to figure that out. What do we need to measure to understand the workload that we are having? So it comes down to using the right tooling to put into your application to measure the right things. So, right?
Yeah. And the good thing is that out of the box with Azure Monitor App Insights, there are a lot of good reports for the common things. You can see, like, where you're throwing the most errors, where you're using the CPU. You can run even cost reports. There's reports that show you how you're generating costs or how you're generating expenses, and which one of those resources are generating the expenses.
And
then you can start to narrow it down from there to see, like, if you're looking at like a SQL server and an app insight, or app service, you know, with a website and an API, you can see that, well, my SQL server is generating the most, so maybe I should look at that and see if I'm using the right size SQL server for it.
Okay, it sounds a little bit like a detective job, right?
Yes. Yeah, you're actively debugging. Like, if you're a software engineer going in and figuring out the code, here you're figuring out, like, what's there's no real easy way to kind of tell where things are. You kind of have to figure out the use.
Yeah.
You there?
And that makes a lot of sense. It really does. You can hear me still?
Now I can.
Now you can. All right. Good. That's the beauty of being live.
Totally blank.
Whoops. All right. Well, you're back, or you're still here. We saw you the whole time. You just looked like a question mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Everything turned off. Sorry about that. Okay, so where was I?
Well, we were saying that it's kind of like a detective job, and you have to focus on, like, you're trying to find things, right?
The good thing is that there's a lot more clues available to you to see that. It's just you don't have to know where to look, but you have to know what to look for. Which is key. You know, and your architects or system admins or site reliability engineers should understand that, because they're the ones, in most cases, provisioning your equipment, and they should be able to know what to look for. The same thing, like if you had an on-site DBE, like, to manage your SQL instances or your database instances, they know the technology, they know what signs to look for. You need people to be able to watch that and understand what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And just to, like, throw almost like a curveball into that. Once you got it all perfect, once you got it all set, right? You may even have, been able to configure, auto scaling or something like that, which is brilliant if and when it works, right? It's maybe a little bit tricky to put it right, but now you have it all set. It's your site is auto scaling. It's all beautiful. And then all of a sudden, the biggest problem that could ever hit any application ever occurs. And that is that you become successful. Because obviously, your architecture was never built for that amount of success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other almost ball game, right? When you maybe have made some assumptions which were real when you started, but then much later, oh my gosh, the same thing is not true anymore. And now you're in a bind.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of where the, app monitoring comes in. You're constantly watching and looking for that. And, sometimes you learn a lot that the cloud, the way it's configured, might not work. Like we started talking about in the beginning, you start off with a virtual machine that has everything and it's too much. So you scale down to a, software as a service, like the app service or SQL Server. So you might realize that, now you've grown and it's time to, go back to those. But that's where that constant monitoring is. Eventually, most applications can outgrow it. You would have the same problem if you're on-prem, right? Like there's apps I've worked on where between 10 o'clock in the morning and 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the apps were basically useless because there were way too many people on there. So we had to figure out ways, to bring those up to scale or just pay for, dead weight in the hours.
Right, exactly. And that really is a challenge because you didn't know before, but at a certain level of usage, at a certain capacity requirement, you will find your bottlenecks. You didn't know you had them until you hit a certain level of usage. And then all of a sudden, something chokes. Like, okay, so many users are hitting the website, and now we have an issue with the fact that, it can be weird things like all of a sudden a SQL Server report is kicking off right at the peak. And that never happened before, but it happened now, and now nobody can use anything. And that's when you really need to measure the right things, and you need to be on top of that game.
Yep. Yeah. It's so common how often that happens too.
It's unfortunately the thing, yeah.
The previous job, we moved all the transactional kind of things to like 2 a.m. to prevent that.
Yep.
But that meant we had a window from like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. to get everything else done because those jobs kicked off, and when they kicked off, everything was basically useless.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about replicas, which you basically can just configure. For example, SQL Server, now that we're talking about it, you can just configure, I want a replica of that database. So let that database continue to service the users, that's fine. But on my replica, the whole other capacity right over there, away from the users, I will run a heavy report on that. And if I don't want the replica, once I'm done with my report, I can trash it again. It's gone.
Yep.
And that's a beautiful way of approaching those things or getting around them, right?
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, cool. So to sum it up, we need to know what we're measuring, and we need to put the right measurements in place. And that's sort of the way to understand how to pay for what you use only.
But one additional thing to that is just not figuring it out. Your measuring and monitoring is always changing. It's not configure these alerts and I'm done.
No.
As you start to learn more about your applications and your systems, you may need to tweak that or change different things. As you start fine-tuning pieces, you'll find other potential areas to fine-tune.
Yeah, brilliant. Those are wise words. I'm going to let you have the last say in this episode. Brilliant to have you with us on the Cloud Show, Joe. Hope you come back sometime in the fall. And thanks, everyone, for watching the Cloud Show today.
Thanks for having me.